Welcome to the Rebel Podcast, a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Michael Dargy, and welcome to the new segment, the cSPACE Sessions. And this is going to be a recurring segment where I'm going to introduce you to some amazing people that inhabit cSPACE King Edward here in Calgary Southwest. And to start off this series, please welcome to the show the CEO of cSPACE, Mr. Deeter Shurig. Welcome to the Rebel cSPACE Sessions. This is cSPACE session number 1, and I'm sitting here in cSPACE studio with Deeter Shurig. How you doing?
Doing great.
You look good.
Thank you. If only people could see me now.
Well, you're sitting here, you're chilling we're the 4th floor of cSPACE, which is an amazing building, which we'll get to in a minute. You're the CEO. You rode your bicycle here for this interview. It's a sunny day.
What more could you want, right?
Right, exactly.
It's one of those perfect Alberta days.
That's awesome.
Blue skies, white puffy clouds. Yeah. Fantastic.
I love it. I've got the window open, so you might hear some dogs barking in the background, and there's a cat that lives across the street, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
So if you could, why don't you bring our listeners up to speed on what you're doing right now? I mean, I said you're the CEO of cSPACE. Why don't you walk us through sort of what your day looks like? And then I'd like to find out how you got here.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds great. So, yeah, I've had a very kind of fortuitous life journey, if you will.
Yeah.
Currently with cSPACE, and we're a nonprofit real estate organization, essentially. So we kind of, our day-to-day is thinking about how can we support the creative sector in Calgary, and then ultimately developing spaces to provide the necessary conditions for creatives to thrive. And obviously there's a huge importance put on what artists and cultural nonprofits bring to a city.
Yeah.
And we want to be part of that conversation. And so really, we look at what are the conditions that creatives need from space, from community, from opportunities for collaboration, and then see how we can develop that.
That's awesome. Well, I fell in love with this building a couple of years ago. I came to see a friend of mine who was sharing space across the hall with Newer Films. And as soon as I walked into this place, I was like, oh my God, this is like home. So well done, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's, I think one of the most exciting parts about this, and, essentially just in a snapshot, cSPACE King Edward, which is our first facility, is a 50,000 square foot multi-tenant center. Yeah. It's populated with a whole community of artists from all artistic disciplines.
Yeah.
And I think, the thing that gives me a tremendous amount of satisfaction is we've applied a kind of a community building approach that takes what one might hope for as a kind of diverse, vibrant community, and we've brought it down to the scale of a building. Right. And so, we've got, from dancers and thespians and writers to painters and designers and like you mentioned, Newer Films. There's a full gamut there of creative entrepreneurs. And then as well, we've got a Montessori school. So it keeps on the legacy of this former building's life. So it was a 100-year-old sandstone school that's stood the test of time, if you will.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
And then on the flip side, we've got the Calgary Association of Lifelong Learners. So on any given day, there's this spirit of being accessible and inclusive and diverse, and it feels like a very much like a vibrant city, but within the context of a building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And there's that beautiful theater downstairs. There's, the boardrooms and, it's amazing. So if you live in Calgary, you desperately need to come up here and have a look. Is cSPACE going to be open to the public starting this week, or is it being...
Yes, it's a great question. Like, obviously we're in the context of COVID-19, right? For anybody who's
good times
listening to this in a few short months after we've, gotten by and gotten through this. But, I think the reality is that a lot of people are being cautious.
Yeah.
So while government is saying, let's open our doors and we're going to do it in stages, I think, everybody's trying to figure out how best to reopen to business, and we're doing the same. So, we want to make sure that people feel safe and that we're following protocols. And so it's going to take a little time to do that. But June is what we're aiming for.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you can't come in right away, drive by the place. It's beautiful. And if you're not from Calgary, and as soon as travel becomes possible again, you have to come by and check it out, because it is something special.
Absolutely. Well, and to that point, all of our tenants are adapting as well to COVID and have adjusted their practices, right? Yeah. So some of them are not going to be programming until the fall. Others have gone to digital platforms, and others will be, being more active in June. But I think at the core, we're also a community place, and that's what's most disruptive about this time, is that it's about bodies in space and sharing time together, right? So whether it's coming to see an art opening or a play or an idea session in the theater or a networking opportunity, this place is active and dynamic. And we had a weekly farmers market that happened every Saturday.
I missed that.
I know, right? It's very true. Like there's something fantastic about celebrating the hyper local.
Sure. Yeah.
So
absolutely. We that dog is awesome, because we'll definitely hear that on the podcast. I was doing some background, and I found an article that you wrote about container space, and I believe it's the one down in Sunnyside, right?
That's right.
And so you've been sort of active in this, activating spaces for artists. You've been sort of part of this for a long time. Can you sort of give me some background on how, where Deeter came from, and how you got involved in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the core, it's probably because I've had close proximity to the arts all my life. So my father was a wildlife photographer, and everything was framed and caught. So I had an appreciation for the natural landscape and wildlife and photography, and taking pictures. So that was sort of the early formative parts of my creative development. And then I got very quickly involved in arts and visual communications, music and band, and then also drama through high school.
Nice.
And then the trajectory was I decided to pursue acting, and I moved to Toronto and decided to do my BFA in acting. And then
awesome.
It was like, why not, right? Let's do this. And then, it was funny the way it worked out, because the first year was a general year. So everybody, it didn't matter if you wanted to be production or an actor. Yeah. Everybody was in the same year. And then you applied to get into the ensemble program the second year.
Right.
Well, I applied, I got in, had a fantastic audition, but the audition scared me so badly. I said, no, forget it. I'm not ready for this.
Really?
So I was one of the individuals who said no to being accepted into an acting program, right? And then I decided to go into design, because I still really found the medium of theater incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I can always go back to acting at some point. But for this time, I'd like to develop my design skills. So I studied costume and set design, and ultimately became a set designer for about a decade.
Jeez.
And then what happened after that was I sort of got equally interested in sustainability and the kind of the health of the planet, and what was this crazy world we were living in, and what were we doing to it.
Yeah.
And it became a sort of a nagging voice that I couldn't shake. And so while I was enjoying working in theater and working across the country as a freelance designer, and working on large scale opera projects, I just felt deeply compelled that if I didn't listen to that voice, I'd go crazy. And so in 2007, as a kind of a mid-30s guy, I decided that I needed to change the lens and pursue architecture. So I was just like, I have to do this. And my wife said,
Oh my
okay, we have to do this. And
Oh, that's so cool.
it's crazy. So yeah, so I ended up moving back to Calgary. So I had been living in Toronto for 15 years and came back to Calgary and started doing the architecture program.
Wow. That's a right turn, hey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely. So I often kind of describe and think about stage design and architecture as almost like sister professions, or they're similar. They use a similar type of skill set. And while, theater is often kind of within the container of the box and architecture is within a greater context, they still think about space, and they still think about experience and so forth, right? So it was a natural progression in many ways.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And so how much of Deeter is in cSPACE?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's a trajectory of the architecture piece.
Yeah.
So I did a 4-year master's in architecture.
Man.
And I did 3 years of studying, building technology and building form and urban design. And then ultimately came to my thesis and said, now what? Like you started this journey thinking about the health of the planet. So now what? Right?
Yeah.
And ultimately I ended up making 2 assumptions. One, that we somehow need to do more with less as a introduction into doing better as a species. We need to do more with less. And we need to be creative about how we do it. We need to adapt.
Yeah.
And so I ended up deciding that we needed to adaptively reuse buildings. Like that was kind of core to what we need to do.
Amazing.
And we need to be creative and support creative entrepreneurship and ideas. And so ultimately I fused those 2 ideas together and decided to focus on King Edward School, which was a vacant 100-year-old school that had been sitting there for 10 years unused.
Right.
And so I thought, well, there's a really interesting idea and compelling idea for a thesis project about how do you adaptively reuse a building and respond not only to the place value of it and the heritage value of it, but also give it new use.
Right.
And so that was the kind of the architectural focus. And then from a process point of view, the theater company reached out to me, said we'd like to work with you as a scenographer, and but not just to respond to a written text, but actually to help devise the text.
Wow.
And so what was remarkable about that process is that it started from nothing. It wasn't just responding, it was also improvising and creating. So we started with 3 themes and started building on those themes. And then what was great for me is that I was trying to figure out, okay, when are we going to need a landscape for this performance, and what are the elements that are going to become part of that landscape? Right. But at the same time, trying to be an objective researcher to see what could I glean from performance practice to inform architecture.
Yeah.
And so what was crazy was, you sit in on a rehearsal and actors come in and they lie down on the floor and they start breathing and making sounds and and starting to just do a physical warm up and a vocal warm up and then start moving through the space. And so I try to capture all those and go, okay, well, how does that inform architecture and pull lessons from that, right? And so that occurred throughout the entire course of the theatrical creation, which was essentially over the course of about 10 months.
Wow.
Which overlapped with the time that I was working on King Edward School. Huh. And I think the interesting part of it is that ultimately I became, not only part of the theatrical ensemble, but also part of the city ensemble. So I started connecting with, individuals who were connected with the school. So the heritage planner and the local MLA and the city councilors and neighbors. And, I'd be walking around the site taking pictures and just trying to discover what the future might hold.
Yeah.
And, over the course of a year, essentially got totally embedded in the discussion about what the future of the school was going to be. And, you know, it was a remarkable opportunity in that way because
no kidding.
I essentially got involved in the entire redevelopment of the project from the ground up. So not only from working on the feasibility of the business model and working with the community, but also building the organization that would eventually redevelop and own the school.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a crazy ride. Like there's so many details. And you know, I was talking with somebody the other day, and essentially I started thinking about this about 10 years ago. And here we are today, you know, sitting in one of the studios that was just vacant, derelict space with pigeons, you know?
Yeah.
And now it's this remarkable place supporting creative entrepreneurs in Calgary.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a case of be careful what you ask the universe.
Sure.
Right?
I'm thinking because it's such a huge thing. Like
it's a huge thing.
Like it must have. I can't imagine what sort of went through your head as this all started coming together. Or is it one of those art projects that just happens naturally and organically? Obviously, you lose sleep a little bit, but it ends up taking on a life of its own, I think.
Absolutely. This is exactly it. It's been for me as a professional journey.
Yeah.
It's certainly what I put out there. You know, I wanted to think about the world beyond the stage and theater, but still keep the theater and arts as core to that new world. Right. And then, you know, adding the layer of architecture on there and urban design and thinking how those different scales interact and kind of lead to more vibrant, sustainable neighborhoods was what I put out there. What I didn't anticipate was that I would be in the right place at the right time and move, you know, 4,000 kilometers back home and be 2 blocks away from a redevelopment project that would take off, right? And so
the universe is funny that way, though.
It's very funny, right? That like the idea of think global, act local is definitely applicable, right?
Isn't that interesting? So I don't want to get too philosophical here, but you know, do you think about that often? Like how this all came together? Do you just sort of accept that as the natural flow of the universe, that this is just how it goes?
I think it's moving too fast. It's moving too fast for that to happen. I think that purpose and passion are incredibly powerful things.
Yeah.
And I think listening to intuition can sometimes surprise one with how remarkable, you know, what journeys can transpire out of it. Right. So, you know, I don't kind of belabor it, but I had no intention of professionally becoming a president and CEO of an organization. Like that didn't motivate me.
Right.
Making difference in the community and answering the philosophical question about what is my place in the universe.
Right.
What can I bring this kid whose dad was a wildlife photographer, you know, like how does that inform my thinking and what value I can bring? So I think I live in some ways on a day-to-day basis of I'm not sure what tomorrow's going to bring, but at the same time, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to live into possibility.
Right.
So I think there's part of me that's wired as theater people and creators and artists are, in that you make the future what you want it to be, whether it's on a canvas in front of you or whether it's a film.
Yeah. And
there's something about living into that.
It's true. Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah. So let me do a clever segue here. That what's next for Deeter or cSPACE or cSPACE projects? Like, is there a bigger picture at play here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bigger play is that the impetus for cSPACE projects is that we build and manage a portfolio of creative hubs.
Gotcha.
And the model is really unique in that obviously we're a social enterprise, so we're incredibly entrepreneurial in how we do our work, but we're motivated by that social purpose of supporting creatives. The way we run our facilities is that they're below market rents.
Yeah.
So the margins are very slim.
Yeah.
And we run it in a cost recovery type way. So that is interesting in itself. what is ideal is if we have a portfolio of buildings, then we gain efficiencies across the portfolio.
Yeah.
So where we're at now is that we've completed this amazing transformation of a 100-year-old heritage school that feels a bit like a spaceship for sustainability with new kind of technological pieces kind of added to it. But now we're on to what's next, and what can be the next place that we place in a significant investment in to harbor creative ideas.
When and there has to be lots of places in town, and probably not just in Calgary, like all over Canada for sure. But like one of the things about Calgary is that we used to have a bad rap for tearing down the old to just put up new stuff, and it's really too bad. But there's still a lot of these places that are around that can be repurposed. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at, other cities like New York City and stuff, and you think about warehouse districts, and you think those kind of create the natural ecology that artists are drawn to, right? They're big spaces, there's natural light.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, not all spaces are conducive to creating community.
Yeah.
So there is a scale, and there is a quality, and there is a character. And so we typically like to think about heritage buildings where you can wrap a narrative around. Like they've got something to offer in terms of a narrative and inspiration, as much as we can kind of exploit them to, create amazing spaces. So,
and I don't know why this popped into my head, but I think it's just one of those details that I just love, is that on the south side of this building, there's these concrete walkways. And I recently learned that those are done in the pattern of the tartan of King Edward.
Correct.
And how freaking cool is that? Then I'm just thinking about, these things that you look for to, tie things together and how you honor the heritage of it. And I like, my mind was blown. And I often go, out there and I just stand in it.
Yes.
And bask in it.
Absolutely.
So
this is one of the things that, gives me a great deal of satisfaction, is knowing that over time, those things are going to be uncovered to people in different ways. Right. Yeah. And so that attention to design thinking of telling the narrative of the story that predates us, and allowing it to come forth in different ways is a possibility for people. So we, in other areas where we've taken the gym flooring from the 1960s addition to the school, which we tore down, but we salvaged the crest. So we salvaged the King Edward Knights and mounted it on a wall.
Yeah, right by the boardroom. And it looks so cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's
great. Those are fun things to do. That's the theater in the building. I think,
right? Yeah, these just these little treats.
Yeah.
When you walk in the doors in the south and you've got those hourglasses, that art installation is beautiful. And I won't give it away, but
that's right.
I think people have got to come and check it out.
People have definitely got to come and check it out.
Yeah. Are you looking at stuff right now for new buildings?
Yeah.
Is this an active pursuit?
Yeah. I think the thing is to keep in mind is that we are opportunistic.
Right.
So we look at liabilities as potential assets down the road. And so we have conversations with the city about city-owned properties that may not have a future and need one, or seeing different opportunities in the city to pop up in terms of residential prospects.
Nice.
So that's constantly bubbling. And, what we've done with the King Edward project is we've taken a multi-stakeholder process, and we've made it so that there's dividends for multiple stakeholders. So we've our shareholders, for example, the Calgary Foundation was one of our major contributors that helped us close on the land sale.
Yeah.
And then ultimately that triggered a municipal investment, and then a provincial investment, and also a federal investment. So there's to pull off these projects, and it's, call it 8 years really from getting it from feasibility to completion and all the way through to deficiencies getting completed. That is a long process.
Yeah.
And maybe our second project won't take as long, and our third project will be even quicker.
Right. Lessons learned
and having a proof, a case that is now proven will certainly be helpful going forward.
Awesome. So. Are you still actively involved in theater at all? Like, is this like, what does that look like for Deeter personally?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I would love to have time to do some design work, but I have not had an opportunity. So the last set design that I worked on was during my thesis, during my architecture thesis, and now it's been buildings and building scale and running an organization. So
right. And do you? This is such a weird thing to say now during the COVID days, but before pre-COVID, were you did you get a chance to go out and see theater? Like, what are your thoughts on local theater scene?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to live a very creative life with my family. I've got a couple of young kids, so they're 8 and 9, and my wife teaches at an art-centered learning school.
Oh, great.
So, aside from the dynamics of having a young family, we try to get out to art openings and, to the theater every now and again. And I certainly don't see as much as I've seen in the past. Yeah. But I certainly recognize the importance of it for sure.
That's great. I'm just thinking about the tenants that are in this building. Was the mix on purpose, or is it one of those things that just happened organically as well?
We place a very high value on placemakers. So how in your individual practices or in that of your organization are you contributing back to the community and investing in place? Right. And so we like to use the word that we curated the community. Yeah. So we tried to assess not only the value from a disciplinary view, because we wanted, as our first project, we wanted to have as much diversity within the building as possible, and not just have a theater center, for example. We wanted it to be a creative hub in all respects. Yeah. And so we were very diligent in running processes and trying to get those artists and organizations that were natural collaborators, that were highly invested in place, like I mentioned, and could really help bring the profile of the building up in some ways. So it was entirely not by accident, but it also did evolve over time. And now that we've been open for a couple of years, we've seen some great success stories. We've seen stories of tenants maybe growing up and needing more space. So that's been great to see. Yeah. Some of them have had to move on. And then we've also seen artists who started in a smaller space, actually in this space right here. Yeah. Feast Letterpress was one of the tenants in this space. And then they migrated up and got a larger space when one came available. So it's really interesting as we get a few years of operation under our belt that you start seeing how the community changes. Right. So
that's outstanding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, your journey is amazing. And I know we did talk a little bit about how it happened somewhat organically, but it's, because you were present, you saw the opportunity. And what advice would you give to others that, could maybe help them on their journey, or recognize when they're, in the right place at the right time or not? Or, do you know what I mean? Like, what would Dieter's, the one thing that we all need to know?
Oh, wait, Michael. The one thing that you need to know. Yeah. I don't know. Know yourself, maybe. Oh. Maybe know yourself. Yeah. I think if anything, what this has taught me is that there's an engagement and a presence, maybe, in terms of listening and being open and not being too quick to formulate a path, but allowing yourself to just be present and true and listen. Yeah. And then allowing that to inform the journey. I think we live in a obviously amidst COVID, it's a crazy time. And in some respect, how we land in this may be about being hyper local, about thinking global, but being very invested locally. And I think there's something also in being present and quiet and slow that is important.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it does feel like maybe we were at a bit of a frenetic pace until this happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think obviously there's incredible ability of technology to open up so many pathways.
Yeah.
But there's also an aspect to it that it convolutes things and things get busy and you don't really get the kind of clarity of thought, perhaps.
Are you a freshwater or saltwater guy?
Oh, a little bit of both.
Okay.
A bit of both. Why not?
A little bit. Okay, cool. Are you a skier or a snowboarder?
Skier.
Excellent. Are you sherbet or are you ice cream?
Oh, ice cream all day.
Favorite flavor?
Oh, just anything.
That's awesome.
It's like the comfort COVID, right? It's like right? What's in the fridge?
Rocky Road. It doesn't even matter anymore.
Very true.
That's awesome. Have you ridden any of these electric scooters?
I have not.
Interesting.
But I just got off my bike today. So that was good.
That's great. Dieter, thank you so much for coming up here and helping all of us understand better what you've created and what's happening here, because I think it's monumental. Awesome.
Well, it's been great to be here, and there's such a creative talent in Calgary and an amazing community here at cSPACE. And hopefully our listeners will come out and check everyone out.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. We've got new segments and shows dropping all the time, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And if you or someone you know would be a great guest on the show, why don't you reach out through our website, www.therebelrebelpodcast.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.